I'd love to welcome Ellen Grace Henson to the conversation. How are you?
I'm great, Sai. How about yourself?
I'm well, thank you so much. We live in interesting times, to say the least, and it's always good to be with you. Thank you for making the time.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's a joy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got the upcoming event on the 19th, and the breadth, I'll say, of the narrative and the themes at play. And I don't want to restate them, but I know you've seen them, you've witnessed them, you've digested them. I would love to know what kind of runs through your mind as you've experienced all that.
Well, there are four themes for this conference: tech-enabled, business-focused, human-powered, and society-embracing. I find all of them very compelling. I'm a technologist by nature. Sometimes I characterize myself as an engineer who loves people. And I also find business very exciting. Solving problems for people, solving problems for companies is what I do. Human powered is so powerful, is such an awesome theme. We forget when we get caught up in business and we get caught up in technology that it's, regardless of how cool the tech is, we're developing it for human beings. And it's human beings who are developing it. And at the core of every business is a customer who is willing to pay for a certain package of value. And if we're not understanding who that customer is and we're not understanding the value they need, it's difficult to be successful as a business. Being a technologist, I've been in tech for a long time. Let me step back a minute. So I studied architecture and urban planning at MIT. So I was doing human-centered, user-centered design before the terms were coined. I did, though, get very enamored with computers at the time. And so I started my career as an engineer. And I worked for several years as an engineer and a technical manager. And then, frankly, I wanted bigger problems to solve. I like big, complex, kind of messy things. I decided to transition into product management because I wanted to learn more about how companies operate. And product management at its best is responsible for assuring that all of the different people and teams inside a company are aligned around an understanding of who the customer is, what the customer values, what the customer needs. I started consulting, and as a consultant in product management, I've helped over 100 companies understand their customers better, understand their markets better, and work more effectively to launch their products. I've worked on hardware products, consumer and enterprise. I've worked pretty broadly in software, content delivery networks, IoT. I actually was responsible. I always loved doing video conferencing calls because my first product was the first commercial IP-based desktop conferencing software. And it's very exciting sometimes for me to see how technology has evolved, or sometimes it's very interesting to see how long it takes for technology to get to a point where human beings can actually leverage it. So to get back to the conversation around human-powered, business-focused, tech-enabled, when I started working on product management process, it became very clear to me that not everybody in the company understands who the customer is or has the same understanding of the customer. And one of the biggest points of failure isn't in feature function, isn't in the technology, but it's in a lack of alignment across different teams. So, for example, I had a client where sales was selling something different than what product was building. The company was a first mover in their market. They had been very successful, and they were starting to see some competitive pressures. So they decided to enhance their product strategy. Well, somehow or another, after those initial discussions between sales, product management, engineering, and other teams, that they diverged. And it wouldn't have mattered how good that product was. It wasn't going to meet customer expectations because customer expectations had been set by the sales team. there was a serious lack of alignment. That's how I want to characterize it. The teams weren't engaged together in a coherent way to deliver value to the customer. They ended up losing market share, losing customers, and the customers they were able to retain cost them quite a bit of money and time in order to overcome that huge gap between what the customers were expecting and what the company delivered. There's 1,000 millions of stories like that, where at one point in the relationship with the company, maybe the customer was happy, and then at another point in the relationship with the with the company, the customer found reason to be grossly disappointed.
Yeah. Ellen, you bring up a very interesting point. I don't want to interrupt your story if you have more, but you bring up a very, very key point. And I'd love your thinking on it. So I want to let you finish your story before I ask the question, if you will.
Well, Sai, I could tell, like I said, hundreds of stories. The point I want to make, though, is just to bring up the concept of customer experience.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversation in the last few years about that term, customer experience. And I want to be clear that when I use the term customer experience, I mean the experience that a customer or a prospect has with your company from when they first start looking for a solution into when they engage with you, when they're using your product, when they're seeking support, and when you end of life that product. It's every single touch point, every single conversation, every single aspect of that relationship. And it's important to deliver value at every single aspect throughout that relationship. And delivering that value does take a team, and it takes a team that's aligned and engaged around a shared understanding of who the customer is, what the customer needs during those different phases of the relationship. And it's a team that's collaborating and coordinating, not teams that are operating within silos, but that teams that are designing the customer experience together, understanding everybody's role in delivering value so they can leverage each other most effectively. And that's that's a very strong passion I have to help companies understand the value of every aspect, every team, every person in the company in delivering value to the customer and in helping generate awesome business results because of that.
Very well said. Very well said. So I've worked in a lot of environments where we talk about, are we focused on the customer? Are we customer centric? Are we user centric? Kind of all those words. And in a lot of times we say, well, are we giving the customer what they need, right? Or the user what they need? Are we exploring that needs? The one question that I often like to pose, especially when we go down this thread is, are we serving the human need? Kind of, it's not only customer centric, but it's human powered, right? And human centric. And then also, is it really a customer experience, or how are we fulfilling the human experience? I'd love for you to comment on kind of how that sort of strikes you and the distinctions there.
That's a very rich question, Sai, and it's absolutely spot on. I want to say that the customers typically are human beings. The employees in the company that is developing the product or the service, delivering the product or the service, they're also human beings. And empathy is one of the most powerful human emotions, human experiences, and foundations for positive relationships. We discussed earlier, Sai, how human beings make emotional decisions. So as you're designing, developing your customer experience, as you're thinking about what your customer needs, you do have to go beyond feature and function. You do have to go beyond the functional aspects of your customer's job, or the functional aspects of their use of audio, their use of video, whichever it is, however they're engaging, whatever the product or technologies are that you're offering to them. And how do they feel? How do they feel when they first start looking for a solution? Are they feeling, insecure? Are they feeling desperate? What's the problem they're trying to solve? And what's the result that they need? value is a very interesting concept. And I know, especially when I engage with tech companies and I have that first conversation about what's the value that they offer, I most often get a response around feature function, around technical performance, how fast can you push pixels over the internet?
Right.
Customers, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy and you think about how, foundationally our needs are functional needs, shelter, food, etc. But as you go up the hierarchy into, up to transcendence, those are all part of the human experience, and human beings essentially, we seek more expansive experiences. We need a company to not only provide the right feature functions, we need a company to provide a sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to help me when I need help? Will I get the kind of support I need? Are they easy to do business with, or is this going to be a hassle every single time I'm going to try to interact with them? And up until, will this help me get a promotion? Will this help me have a more satisfying life? People buy, if we focus just on functionality, then there's no difference between a high-end pen and a $1.29 pen.
Yeah.
I like to think about different categories. If you talk about a pen, which is something everybody can relate to, most of us have used a pen at one point in our life. Am I looking for just pure functionality and, that experience? Or am I also looking for status? Am I also looking for what I might consider to be a higher end experience?
Yeah.
It would make it changes the approach to the product and to the services if you understand that bigger picture around what your customer needs, wants, values, and is willing to pay for.
Ellen, I want to ask another question, because I think you're central to a lot of this is the value aspect, right? Like you said, my experience of something is going to be a derivative of, and a conglomeration of numerous things, but a derivative of what value I get in that experience of that thing. So whatever it may be, right? Like the pen that you mentioned. The question, as you look at leaders, as you look at where we've been to where we're going, especially given the crisis and the themes and the narratives of the event, how do you see, or what wisdom can you offer organizations, leaders, from I'll say the historical way that we've dealt with value and what customers might want and need and expect and want to experience? And then how should we begin to look at value kind of in the way forward with all the uncertainty and the risk and, and those, I'll say the new normal-ish that we're going into?
An intriguing set of issues, Sai. I want to comment first that early in my career, when I was engaging with clients, I would hear often about when companies talked about value, they were talking about the value they were able to extract from the customer. Mm-hmm. It was very much an internal me, us, all about the company and the financial results that they can generate. And the attitude was more exploitative.
Yep.
How can we exploit this relationship to generate more revenue? Then we've seen a shift over the last few years where it is more, what is the value we deliver? And how can we optimize the value that we deliver? We need to understand the financial parameters, of course, that we're operating within and whatever business goals we have. And in that context, how can we deliver the best value and the broadest set of values? What human beings value shifts. Mm-hmm. Partially as we achieve different things, we're looking forward then to having more in various ways. And we also see generational shifts. I've done some research into how purchasing decisions are driven across different generations. And younger generations are making more decisions in purchasing around sustainability, around more, how does this, what's your supply chain? What's the vision of the company? What's the purpose of the company? So children and younger people, maybe millennials and younger, have a much stronger set of criteria, or a much broader set of criteria for their purchasing decisions. We've also come to realize over the last several years that when employees are engaged, when employees feel satisfied in their work, when employees feel appreciated for the work they're doing, they're much more effective in their jobs. They're much more productive in their jobs. And when it's so interesting to me how the employee engagement, employee satisfaction is a foundation then for higher customer satisfaction and better business results.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see how these things really fit together, and the importance of bigger picture stuff. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the letter that the Business Roundtable published, was that a year ago or so?
Yeah. Yep.
Saying, hey, yes, of course, financial results are important, shareholders are important, but we've come to realize that we have a much broader set of constituents, or a much broader set of stakeholders. And our stakeholders have to include our customers, our employees, our supply chain partners, our local communities, the broader society. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
And it's not as complex or difficult as we might think. When you can align and engage your diverse set of employees and bring everyone together to solve these challenges, to address these challenges with that higher level vision in mind, it's incredible the transformation that can happen inside a company. We sometimes, one of the old-fashioned ideas is that engineering and sales are the only contributors to revenue and everybody else is overhead. Sometimes I get angry about that attitude, quite frankly, because if you don't have good performance in your operations, if your customer is not getting an awesome support experience, especially now, if your presence and the information that you're providing to your customers via whatever channels of communication you have, if it's not information that's relevant to them, you can lose a customer at any point.
Yep.
And so everybody in the company, and every functional group inside the company, and every silo inside the company is essential to delivering that value. And I really appreciate how over the last several years, we're thinking about business, or thinking about society, or thinking about the role of human beings in business success has really expanded. That's a very, very exciting circumstance for me. What it does take, though, is a different way of thinking and a different way of structuring our relationships inside the company, and structuring the relationships with the customer. And over the last several years, I've developed several frameworks and methodologies that help, that kind of simplify the model for how we want to organize ourselves and how we want to set up those conversations inside the company around delivering value to the customer. One of my models, very simple, not necessarily easy to implement, but very simple, is the wheel of value, where the customer is at the center of the wheel. All the functional groups, including partners, are segments on the wheel. And the wheel of value is basically a metaphor that helps create a space in a workshop environment for people to have those conversations about, okay, how does your team support delivering value to the customer? How can I help you deliver better value to the customer? And how can you help me? How can we leverage each other against these common goals of delivering value to the customer? And I know a lot of people, when they practice, when they do customer experience design, a lot of times people look at that as a marketing exercise. I do look at it as a cross-functional or cross-silo exercise, because, again, every team inside the company participates at different phases of that relationship with the customer in delivering value to the customer. Yeah. It's much more effective than, if you're going to get a coherent experience for the customer, if you're going to make sure that there's excellent handoffs between the different phases, and if you're going to make sure that there's leverage across all the different teams, then that should be a joint exercise. Designing the customer experience is much more powerful as a joint exercise.
Well said. And it's much more, the key thing is, you're emphasizing it wonderfully. It's holistic. The customer experience isn't owned by one party. We all contribute to that experience, and it's an opportunity for enrichment in both sides. And that's why the word human to me is so powerful, right? Because you as an organization serving a specific base of humanity, that base is going to experience something, the organization will experience something. It becomes a win-win potential versus a one-way sort of communication or a marketing or a sales pitch or whatever it may be.
Or an exploitation or an extraction
Yes,
of value.
exactly.
Right.
I have one last sort of question, and definitely want to respect your time. But this last question is, if there was one thing that you would suggest, leaders, organizations to really embrace, and it's being distinct in the new world versus the old world, I'll say, if we can use those sort of that nomenclature, what would that be, Ellen?
One thing.
Just one thing, right? If it was only that, yes.
Understanding that your customers are human, that they do need value at every point in the relationship. And it's really your cross-silo teams, that diverse set of skills and diverse set of thought that can enable the value that your customers need at every point in the relationship.
Very well said. I love it because it's not one thing in the sense that it's one thing. It's one big thing that has many elements to it, exactly as you eloquently said. So very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time, and I am optimistic that definitely we'll do more together. So thank you so much, Ellen, for making the time.
It's very exciting, Sai. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I really appreciate the thought space and the human space that the conference is looking to expand and push forward, and I'm very excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Take good care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.